The New York Mets just completed their fourth 100-win season in franchise history and their first since 1988. Yet, the Braves clinched the National League East. To sort through all of this, here is an extra edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, I did a show at 11:30 this morning, basically because I was accepting defeat, and I was also trying to jinx the Braves, to be completely honest. And, I also was coming off a night watching the Phillies celebrate, and I did a show, which I still think is a lot of fun, where I was just talking about where the Phillies are based on their expectations, where the Mets are. Now, here we are at the end of the day, and I didn't think I was going to record on that show. I said I'm going to have this podcast released at 7 o'clock. We won't know what happens at that point. If there is a reason to record a podcast, I'll record one, meaning if the Mets were still in contention. But I changed my tune, and I decided to hop on. I obviously added something to the audio version of the podcast, but I wanted to deliver something to the YouTube audience because this is still a great season. It's just a bittersweet moment. I mean, you're talking about a franchise that hasn't won 100 games since 1988. I was negative 7 years old. This is the first time in my lifetime that the Mets have had a 100-win team. This is the best regular season I've ever been able to witness. And it's frustrating because September essentially put a damper on what was a great season, but it's not just September. It's the fact that the Braves are a great baseball team. You tip the cap to them. Since June, they were on a different level. They chased down the Mets, and they beat them straight up, head to head. And obviously, that's extraordinarily frustrating because had the Mets won one game in that series this weekend, they would have been the ones clinching tonight. They would have been the ones with a champagne shower. And instead, the Braves got to enjoy that again. But one of the things that I talked about on the audio version of the show today that I bring to the YouTube audience now is maybe this is a rallying cry for the New York Mets moving forward. They played great baseball today. They won both games. Brandon Nimmo had an unbelievable day. Jeff McNeil might have just won the batting title. We'll see what happens with Freddie Freeman. We'll see if McNeil does play the final game. I'd imagine he will. Maybe they'll DH him. I'm not sure exactly what the plan is. He's the one guy that you can watch on Wednesday that has something to play for. I'm sure we'll see more Francisco Alvarez behind the dish. That was fun at the end of the second game. Alvarez also homered and hit a 108-mile-per-hour double. So he saw some easy pitching with the Nationals, but he showed you what he can do, getting his first two big league hits. We'll see probably some Mark Vientos as well, as we saw down the stretch of that game. But now there's one last baseball game to be played. If the Mets win that game, they will actually finish with the second best record in franchise history. Then you turn the page to the playoffs, and it's most likely Padres. Let me check right now as I record here what the Phillies did tonight. I imagine that they may be, yep, they mailed it in. Lost 10-0. I'm sure they want nothing to do with the New York Mets. The Padres are winning 5-0. So the Padres, if they win, this is in the seventh, they will be an 89-win team. The Phillies now would officially have been eliminated from playing the Mets because the most they can be is an 88-win team. Looks like the Mets will be seeing the Padres in the first round of the playoffs. Now you just have to go out and prove that you're as good of a baseball team as you believe to be for the New York Mets. They have been talking all year about taking it one step at a time. And now you just have to get through a 3-game wild card round against the Padres. And they're fully capable of doing it. They're going to slot their rotation exactly how you want. Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, pitching after what happened in Atlanta. You'd expect the best out of them, and you'd like to end the series right there in 2 games and move on to face the Dodgers. And that's going to be a tough journey. And if the Mets are to make it to the World Series, they're going to have to go through the Padres, the Dodgers, and likely the Braves. But this is a team capable, and I love what I heard today. Mark Canha discussing how this is a team that always had World Series aspirations that didn't aspire to win the National League East. Seth Lugo saying that they believe they are better than the Atlanta Braves, and they would love the opportunity to prove it in the playoffs. This could have just lit a fire under the Mets that should have already been there, but to lose in that embarrassing fashion, maybe that sparks a run. Maybe that sparks this team to go on and win 13 games and hoist a World Series trophy, right? Is it 13? 2 plus 3, 5. Yeah, I did the math right on that. 13 more wins for a team that's already won 100. It's a special ball club, and I felt like I had to come on here and say something about it as opposed to just letting the episode where I'm basically giving the Phillies praise for making the playoffs live alone atop the Locked On Mets page when this season essentially came to a close tonight. It was a great year, and they gave us just an incredible 6-month journey through this regular season where they won a lot more than they lost. They took it a series at a time, and they won most of the series they played. Yes, they lost some big series in September, the worst being that sweep at the hands of the Braves. But you know what? I remember 2015 where the Mets got swept by the Cubs in their season series, and then they went in the playoffs and they swept them in the National League Championship Series. Maybe this time around, they will go from getting swept to lose the division, and they can have their champagne shower tonight, and the Mets can have one when they're going to the World Series in a couple of weeks. You should not count out this team. This still has been one of the best seasons in franchise history. They win the final game of the season. It will be the second best season based on record the franchise has ever had. But really, the one way to make this one of the greatest seasons of franchise history is to go out and do it in October. And for a franchise that hasn't been there since 2016, and that was a 1-game wild card, we now get 3 playoff games this weekend, unless the Mets finish it in 2, where we get to see this team that I think we've all fallen in love with throughout the season play on the biggest stage and the brightest lights. And personally, I can't wait to now move beyond this NL East race and focus on the playoffs because it's going to be one hell of a ride. Anyway, that's going to be all for this bonus edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review where you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball. Follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.